It's an understatement to say that fatherhood is challenging. So, what parts of us does it challenge, and how might we support those parts? Joining me today to share his 20 plus years of experience engaging with his cast of inner characters is Peter Mortifee. You can say hi, Peter.
Hi, Matthew. It's great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. So I'll introduce you, Peter. Since 2001, Peter has chaired the Somerset Foundation, which has supported over 100 social initiatives focusing on advancing well being. His expertise spans governance, strategy, and financial sustainability. Additionally, he co founded and chairs the Chute Creek Stewardship Society, an organization committed to a community's flood protection and salmon habitat restoration. Engaging globally, he's a member of the Ashoka Support Network, an advisor to the Wellbeing Project Stewardship Council, and a global ambassador for Outward Bound International. In 2008, Peter relinquished his clinical assistant professorship with the Department of Medicine at University of British Columbia and retired completely from his medical practice in order to explore new ways of engaging. Based in Vancouver with his wife Nancy, they cherish time with their family and grandchildren. And through engaging in social change initiatives and photographic reflections, his desire is to contribute to the co-creation of a world of personal and collective well-being, which is music to my ears. It's so good to be speaking with you today, Peter.
Thank you, Matthew. It's good to be here. I care deeply about the well-being of men and fathers, and I know you do as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to engage in this conversation.
Beautiful. Well, I want to acknowledge our friends David and Sean for connecting us, my buddies in the Rad Dad Collective. And let's jump in. I sent you some questions in advance, so these won't be surprising, but I'm going to read them just at the beginning to get us going. How did you first learn about this concept of a cast of characters, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question for me to reflect on. I think the truth for me was in my early 40s. Well, actually, as I turned 40, that was the end of the first half of my life and the beginning of the second half of my life as I reflect on it now. And it was a very, very challenging time for me. And a number of things changed significantly. And it was through uh, therapeutic processes, through reading books, through connecting with other people that were helping me on my journey that um, I began to realize that there were very important parts inside of me that I had not previously been so clearly aware of. And once I became aware of them, I could never become unaware of them.
Mm,
And over these last 20, 25 years, it has been an ongoing exploration and journey of becoming more aware of what's going on inside of me, who these characters are, which I affectionately refer to as the kids on the bus. To embrace them, to learn about them, and to be in the best relationship with them I possibly can be.
mhm. Yeah. And maybe can you give an example of a character? Maybe just any character, just to give people a sense of what you mean by cast of characters.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. About a year ago, maybe not even a year ago, I did a mind map of all these
Mm,
characters there, and there are probably a couple of dozen of them.
mm,
It's really been helpful for me to identify them distinctly, although I'm very aware that they're all part of the whole of my inner mind, my inner psyche, my inner self. One of them would be my narcissist.
mm,
This is a character inside of me that feels that that he has to look good, that he needs to be special, that I need to look good to myself. Uh, um, and he's actually been a very important. He was one of the earlier characters that I became aware of. It was very, very difficult for me to acknowledge um, that I was quite narcissistic, and he's still inside of me. Um, but over the years, my relationship with him has changed quite dramatically. I used to feel very unsettled and put off by others who I judged to be narcissistic.
Mm,
But now it's quite different when I see someone and I have a sense that their bus is being driven by their inner narcissist. My feeling towards them is quite different. It's much more um, compassionate
yeah.
because I've come to learn that inside, underneath my narcissist, is actually a character that, contrary to how he presents himself, he feels very inadequate
Mm,
and unworthy. So that's an example of one of the characters on my bus and my relationship with him.
yeah. Thank you. Why don't we get into fatherhood now with if you can tell us a story about a time during fatherhood when fatherhood as the role brought out your cast of characters in a destructive way.
Well, that's a pretty provocative question. Um, First of all, the first thing that comes up for me around that is I don't think there's rivaled only by my relationship with an intimate partner or maybe with my family, my other family members. Nothing quite triggers the characters on the bus like fatherhood can.
Mm,
I don't see fatherhood as being for the faint of heart. It is an incredibly challenging journey. And it is a journey where we are, and I have been and continue to be, confronted by myself. And when I say myself, I mean these characters in me. Your choice of the word destructive is an interesting one. And I didn't quite know what that meant when I first read your idea, or when I first read this question. And me, how I interpret destructive is, when have my characters been driving the bus? And all of my characters I see as coping mechanisms.
mm,
They're all designed to help me alleviate discomfort, suffering, feelings that I don't want to feel. So there are many times, many times in my experience as a father when I have had those characters driving the bus. And I think what can become destructive, to use that word, is when those characters are driving the bus and I'm unconscious of it and I'm interacting with my children. Um, that can be wounding for them.
mm,
That can be very, very difficult for them. Examples of that might be when, for example, with their mother, when I've been caught in feeling like a victim, or uh, my power monger and controllers taking over, and I'm being a bull in the china shop. That's my children. Our children bathe in the zone of their parents.
mm,
And when I'm being driven by these characters in relationship, for example, to their mother in the past, um, that's not a good scene for them.
mm,
And I'm sure there are many examples of when I've been caught in that way.
mhm. Yeah, there's a term that I heard David, our mutual friend, attribute to you, which was something about holding onto the rope. And it reminds me of that, in those moments of a character taking over and driving the bus and the behavior being more destructive than healthy, let's say, or generative, um, that there's another part of me that might notice and then if I understand the use of that phrase, hold on the rope, just to hold on to uh, staying grounded or staying present and not doing something that I'm going to regret. And maybe you can elaborate if there's a relationship between that holding onto the rope and this destructive behavior as you see it.
Yeah, well, I think there's no question that there are times in life generally, and certainly specifically as being a parent, when the best thing we can do is just hang on.
Mhm.
You know, life can be profoundly painful. Life can bring us tremendous suffering. Life can challenge us beyond what we ever imagined we might be able to cope with. And sometimes the best we can do is we can literally just hang onto the rope and hope to not get swept over the side of the boat while the waves are crashing over the bow.
Mhm.
Um, I think those moments when it's rough for me have been those moments when the characters have started to really scream
Mhm.
and run to the front of the bus to take over the wheel.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, hanging onto the rope is something we have to do every now and again just to get through.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can do that in a way which minimizes the hurt we cause to others and the hurt we cause to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we'll get into a little more of relating to the characters. I want to ask you as well on the flip side, rather than destructive, if you can tell me a story about how in Fatherhood it the cast of characters were brought out in a generative way, in a healthier way.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, and I don't want to go. This analogy, this idea of the characters on the bus. It's one which I found to be really helpful. And when I think of the characters on the bus, I generally think of those characters which are the ones which are challenging for me,
Mm,
the ones that I need to be in relationship with in order to not have them take the wheel of the bus.
yeah.
So it's not so much in my experience that Father could brought out the characters in a generative way, but rather that I was able to be in relationship with these characters inside me at key moments
Hmm.
as a father, such that they didn't take over the wheel,
Hmm.
and that was profoundly generative.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I think fathers know what I'm talking about, and parents in general, like a good moment in parenting when we kind of feel, wow, I really did well with that.
Hmm.
And to me, though, in those moments, it's when the characters have not taken the wheel. So an
Hmm.
example of this was one of my children, when she was in, probably about grade 9. It was an incredibly difficult time. And there was a moment when I came into a room and she was on the floor, and it was a very, very difficult moment.
Hmm.
She was in a very, very, she was really suffering. And so the characters that arose were, oh, I have to make this better, or oh,
Hmm.
we don't want to, we don't want this to hurt, or whatever. I mean, I was aware of these characters just kicking in at this moment of what for me felt like a crisis moment.
Yeah.
And what occurred was I did absolutely nothing other than I just sat down on the floor.
Mm,
I said nothing. And we stayed there for, I don't even remember how long it was. It might have been half an hour. And I just kept knowing that this was not a time to do anything but just be present.
mm,
And that moment I don't think could have occurred had I not been in a place where I was able to acknowledge the characters that were coming up and basically say, hey, we're okay, we got this, we're okay, we just
mm.
need to sit and be present here.
Yeah. Like as if the characters are screaming, do this or do this, and you're like, it's okay. I got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had a similar experience with my daughter when she woke up in the night several times as she was younger, maybe age 4 or 5, and she would scream, and it was like a maybe a night terror kind of thing, and I went in
Hmm.
there one day, one evening, middle of the night, I don't wanna be awake, I wanna sleep, uh, I need to catch up on sleep for many reasons, but I'm there in the middle of the night, and the first thing I did was I asked her a question, and it was like I knew she couldn't hear me, and then I just shut up, and I sat there, and I let her scream with, like, not at me, but she was screaming, and it was uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
of course I wanted to leave, of course I wanted to, like, find out what's going on, I wanted to, fix the situation, and so very similar to yours, I just had to learn to just sit. Just I could tell in the end, I could tell, like, it soothed her that I sat and
Hmm.
didn't try to let my characters take over and do something that wasn't really needed.
Yeah. That's a beautiful moment. That's a great moment in parenting.
Mhm.
And those moments are precious, and they create trust and bonds that endure.
Yeah,
So it's lovely to hear that story from you.
yeah, thank you. I wanna ask about, especially for you as a father, what has being in relationship to these inner characters allowed for? And I think we've touched on it a bit, but maybe if you can elaborate on what else has come from this inner relationships with your characters, especially in fatherhood.
I think it's true to say, Matthew, that for me, my relationship to the inner characters within me, my relationship to myself is as important a priority as anything else in my life.
Mhm,
Um, I mean, I'm fortunate. I've got a roof over my head. I've got food on the table. My basic needs are more than cared for. Um, but when I began to become aware of these characters inside me, and I began to engage with them, and I was helped to engage with them in in a courageous way, because these were many of them were very, very uncomfortable for me to acknowledge existed within me.
mhm,
And I still have parts of me and characters inside of me that we're the only ones that have the conversation. They're not comfortable with me letting other people know about their existence.
mhm,
And if that's the case, then we're not letting anyone else know. Like building trust internally with this cast of characters who I see as kids, who I've come to love and care for, has completely transformed my ability to be loving and caring towards those on the outside.
mhm,
It's absolutely directly connected. When I'm unwell, when I'm rejecting a part of myself, where I feel disgusted about a part of me,
mhm,
that has a profound impact on how I am with others around me.
yeah,
And I think one of the things that's so fascinating about fatherhood is that concurrently, as a father, we have our children behaving as children on the outside, and we have our inner children behaving as children on the inside.
yeah,
And those two are profoundly linked.
mm,
If I'm not doing well with my child characters inside of me, I don't do as well with the children outside of me.
yeah,
When I'm in a place of non-judgment, acceptance, love, I may not be good with what they want to do. I may not I may not allow they don't get to drive the bus on my good
mm,
days when I'm able to hold this. They don't get to drive the bus, but I anything they say goes.
mhm,
There's no censorship on what the characters inside me say. Any efforts I've ever made in my life to the character inside me from the bus, to exile them in perpetuity, have been unanimously fruitless. It's never worked.
Yeah.
In fact, it's created a dynamic of greater discomfort and unwellness within me.
Mm,
So when I'm able to fully embrace the truth of what's going on inside of me and do that in a loving way and do that in a compassionate way, which is what I aspire to do, that transforms my ability as a father to be present for my children. It
mhm,
transforms my ability to be present for youngsters in general. It transforms my ability to be present. So for me, um, they know now that I'm not going away.
yeah.
They know now that we're in this together, and that means, as far as I'm imagining, for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. As you speak about this, Peter, it makes me reflect on how fatherhood, the way I call it in the podcast, fatherhood is a dojo. It's a place of practice. It's a place where I will be tested and I will fail and I will succeed and learn from all of that. And it's there are a lot of times when I see that this experience for me is a microcosm of what I can imagine on a global scale, where I imagine that, a world leader, not in touch with their inner cast of characters, in the way that we would want a leader to be more like a king than a tyrant, similar to within the home, a father more like a king than a tyrant. Um, a lot of harm can come without being aware of who's driving the bus. And of course, in these larger roles that get played, then the more harm that becomes possible. So it has made me oddly more compassionate towards world leaders that I might disagree with. And because I notice in myself, I'm being tested and I'm failing. And who am I to look at someone else and say, well, they should be doing it perfectly because I'm not. Not that I condone certain actions, but I understand how easy things can go off track and my bus can get driven by a character in me that I don't want to be. Um, so yeah, it helps with my sense of compassion, certainly for other fathers, but beyond as well.
Yeah, I completely 100% concur with what you're saying. And I think part of the beauty of what we're dancing with here and what we're exploring as we think about the inner cast of characters and we think of ourselves as fathers and being in relationship with our children, we're really talking about how we show up in the world as men
Hmm.
and how we choose to be in the world as men. And um, what what you're saying just completely resonates. I mean, I I when I find myself being disgusted by the behavior of a political leader, um, my my experience of that has changed. Meaning that I used to feel, oh, I'm just disgusted or very judgmental or whatever it might be around that. But now I may be very unsupportive of a particular way of being and behaving. But to the extent that I feel disgusted or want to reject it or feel rage about it or have a very strong reaction to it, there's a place where that's an opportunity for me to say, oh yeah, and what is that about?
Hmm.
And how does that relate to my capacity to be that way?
Yeah.
Because I don't actually I think I think we all have our cast of characters. And my current thinking about this is that we all have all the same characters, although
Mm,
each of us has a slightly different recipe in terms of how much of this one or how much of that one
mm, yeah.
or how that one shows up. I mean, without being too dogmatic about the framework of this cast of characters and the kids on the bus, I I have a power monger, I have a controller, I have a special boy, I have a incredibly judgmental part of me. there are many characters that are in me that I just see reflected on the outside.
Mhm.
And so when I experience a reaction to what I see on the outside, that's a difficult reaction, particularly if it's like judgmental or rage or disgust, then it's like, oh, okay, so where are we with that in me?
Mhm.
And as I can embrace those characters inside me and know that underneath that character, there's a vulnerability in me, I know that's true for me. I know that behind each of these characters, there's a vulnerability, there's a tenderness,
Mhm.
there's a humanity, there's a wounding. When I connect to that internally, it really, as you say, creates the capacity for me to even be compassionate towards what I'm seeing on the outside. So, this inner relationship and these inner
Mhm.
cast of kids on the bus, this is not just a mental exercise. For me, this is about what I need to do in order to become more of the man I aspire to be, not only as a father, but a man in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a certain amount of what you're saying that, um, it's like I resonate, of course, with everything you're saying. It's I'm hearing a couple things. It's like cleaning up or keeping a clean relationship is good for my well-being, and then it's also good for any of my relationships. And there's a service that I see that gets done when I do my inner work, my family benefits. When I do my inner work, anyone I'm in contact at work with benefits, the people I interact with in my community benefit, even if it's just driving. If I choose to not honk at someone and not get into road rage, for example, like all these things I think have a ripple effect. So I want to somehow link the idea that, as we mentioned, like political leaders and influence, I see that each of us individually also have immense amount of reach in the way that we carry ourselves and the energy we offer to other people, even if it's a small circle, a small town, whatever that is. I still feel it's as valuable as if I were a leader of a community and then had extra responsibility. I feel unequal to those people in that sense that my work is as important as their work, even if I can put them on a pedestal of extra responsibility and therefore XYZ.
Yeah, well, what work could be more important than your work to you?
Hmm.
I mean, I don't think there is any work that's more important than your work is to you.
Yeah.
So when I think of my life, the truth is that I don't think there is anything more important than what my work with me,
Hmm.
because that is the place where it all generates from.
Yeah.
That is how I then show up. And another thing that you alluded to that I want to just riff off for a moment is, and this is my word, it's our impact.
Hmm.
The impact we have. I don't actually think. Well, I think sometimes life gives us an opportunity to see the impact we have, and we go, "Oh, that's interesting," or "Oh, that didn't go well," or "Wow, that's great," or whatever.
Hmm.
We get to see something that we know we had an impact on, and I think most of the time we don't see that. We don't get to see that. Who's to know what the impact of your podcast is?
Hmm.
Who's to know there may be a man listening today, right now, and he's being touched by what we're talking about now, and that helps him. He's at a tipping point in his own trajectory,
Hmm.
and he derives something from the work that you're doing, and it helps him go over a tipping point, and now he takes a whole new direction and goes on to do who knows what,
Hmm.
many of which we might look at and go, wow, way to go, man, that is beautiful work. congratulations on how you've done as a father on this one,
Mhm.
or wow, you've really transformed your working environment, or who knows what. We'll
Yeah.
never see it. We'll never see it. So I used to be quite caught up in thinking, and I think it was the special boy that needed to feel. Let me rephrase that. It is the special boy in me that he needs to feel like he's important and he's having an impact and he's changing the world, and because that's the good, things to do and so forth. But I don't. He's much calmer now. He feels much safer. He doesn't need to push
Mhm.
to get the impact, because I don't think spending our lives worrying about how we're impacting others is where it's at. At least it's not anymore where it's at for me. Where it's
Mm.
at is, can I be well with what's going on in me? Can I
Mm.
be aware and well with the truth of what's happening inside of me,
Yeah.
and then be able to show up in a way which is more aligned with how I aspire to be as a man.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm meant to do. And whatever impact I will have as a consequence of that will be whatever it will be, and I won't get to see most of it anyway.
Yeah, that's a beautiful nuance there, because I wouldn't wanna take responsibility for what other people do with what I give them. I can only take responsibility for if I imagine my energy is like food that I'm handing out to people, they can choose not to eat it. I can be clear about this is good food. I can be in integrity with the quality of this food I'm giving them. But then once they receive it or it's past my boundary to them, it's out of my control.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually doesn't have anything to do with them. It's like, if I can, what we haven't spent a lot of time together, but what I see with you is that you're a man who is hungry to be well.
Mhm.
You're hungry to find your way. You have a desire to be a good father. You have a desire to be a good man. And one of the ways that you're choosing to explore that and to advance that for yourself is doing what we're doing today.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's your shtick.
Yeah.
And whether or not this touches the lives of a lot of people is kind of irrelevant.
Mm.
I mean, we'd love it to,
Yeah.
but to me, what really matters about what's going on here is, how is this serving you to be
Mm.
well? And how is this serving you to be well with you, meaning with your cast of characters? That's the question I ask myself. That's the
Yeah.
way I look at it. And if there are others as a consequence of you showing up at this point of your life in this way, who are moved by what you're doing
Mhm.
and are supported, isn't that great?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
like a bonus.
right, the gravy on top. Yep,
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, so as we're talking about this, practice you've had for, I think you said 20 years with the internal cast of characters, maybe you could elaborate a little bit, Peter, about what is what does that practice look like to be in relation? And, I think you have said before it's could be a daily practice even for you.
Yeah, well, that's a big question. Um, what does it look like to be in relationship with these characters, and how do I pursue this relationship with them? Um, I think I recognize that the answer to that question is unique for each man.
Mhm.
Every man it has their own journey, and their own way of being with themselves, to whatever extent they're able to be with themselves. For me, the journey has had many different colors along the way, many different ways. For example, early on, I was supported to explore creativity as a way of getting more connected to the characters. So um, I painted for a while. Like, for example, I remember this one painting. It was a very tough painting to paint. And I have no training as a painter, and I don't let's think, oh, this is a pretty painting, someone will want it on their wall. That's not the kind of painting I'm talking about. This was, I'm going to let my victim paint.
Mm.
And and it turned up, I remember there was this one photograph of me that I saw that somebody sent, and I looked and I went, oh my goodness. I was so in my victim in that moment that I took the photograph and I cut myself out and put myself in the painting. And then I painted all around that and I let the victim paint.
Mm.
Like I just said, hey, buddy, this is your paintbrush. Go for it. And I let him, and what came out of that was something that was uncomfortable for me to look at.
Mm.
But it was a very, very important moment, because I realized what I was doing was I was allowing that part of me to be seen.
Mm.
I was allowing that part of me to be heard. My victim was exiled. I could relate to being more of a victimizer, but I couldn't relate to being a victim. I
Mm.
found victims quite disgusting. And of course, that was the extent to which I had exiled my internal victim. So by allowing him to paint, it was really a breakthrough moment for me in terms of realizing how important it is for them to be heard and seen for exactly who they are, unfiltered, no censorship, like what's going on with you.
Yeah.
And so that's an example. That was 20 years ago. I mean, today I have a practice of um, checking in. I have a to-do management system, and every couple of days, depending on how often I think it needs to occur, it might be every 2 days, it might be every week. I might let go of it now because we're good. I say, check in with my, melancholy self, or whatever, like another character that I'm working with because he's up and I need to spend some time with him. So I will let him write. Every couple of days, I'll look at what we've written and say, what are you feeling? What does it feel like to be you?
Mm.
Tell me what's going on, and I just write it and let him have it. And that writing isn't for sharing unless he's okay with me sharing it.
Mm.
I mean, it might sound crazy making that I have all this stuff going on inside, but I do. And it feels really important. So I let him write. And every now and again I write something and I share it with others. But I never share it without him being okay with me sharing it.
Mm.
So my relationship with these characters, I think I mentioned it. I've mentioned to you before, perhaps during the recording, that I've made a mind map of all these
Mhm.
characters. That's part of how I'm in relationship with them. And what's kind of interesting to me is I see that there are groupings of characters that are kind of similar in ways. Um, Doing that helps me be more aware of them. It helps me to be more aware of what's going on inside. It helps me to recognize what's happening in me sometimes when I'm reacting. Um, so yeah, that is of being with
Mhm.
them is really important. And I'd like to add another thing.
Yeah.
This is a very, very important piece for me. And that is that I've discovered, and it has been a matter of discovery, I've discovered that behind each of these characters, there's a piece of gold.
Mm.
There's a piece of my humanity. There's a piece of what makes me human. There's a gift.
Mm.
And that wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Mhm.
At first it's like, how do I deal with all of this chatter? Like,
Mhm.
or feeling shame about what was going on and what I was thinking about, or the reactions I'd have, or some of the ways I was behaving. Like, whoa, like, and yet now it's changed. now I'm aware that inside each of these characters, there's some gold, there's a gift.
Mm.
And that's that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy and grateful for all the help I've had over the years from others and from books I've read to help me get to that place.
Mm.
Because now I see this as part of me holding my fullness, holding my humanity, showing up in a way which is what I'm really aspiring to do. And I can't do that if I don't continue this relationship and organically, naturally allow us to discover the gold that's in there.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I wonder, this is beautiful, because I know that for one, to first recognize a part with a name like victim or narcissist, it would be normal to think, well, this is not going to be a useful part. This is going to be a part I have to manage, and I have to just watch out for. And what you're saying is there's something deeper than that. I don't know if there's a spectrum from managing parts to just being with or relating to parts, but there's some other way of being that I hear that you must have in order to get to the gold. It reminded me of taking my daughter to a neighborhood party where they had a friend over. One of our neighbors had a friend over who has predatory birds, so falcons and owls and stuff. And we walked in their backyard, and my daughter was like, "Oh no!" And she just like clung to me and just started screaming. And I was like, "Oh, okay, we're not staying." And internally I was disappointed because I really wanted to experience this, but I was like, this is not a moment to be logical. This is a moment to honor this vulnerable voice. Um,
Hmm.
and I imagine there's
Absolutely.
many opportunities for fathers to have that experience with their kids, especially when they're young.
Oh, yeah. I mean, any father knows that, there are moments with our children where our kids react or freak out about something, and it's like, whoa, well, what's going on
Yeah,
here?
yeah,
Like, why don't we just do this? And to be able to show up for our external children in a way which is not mired in judgment or expectation or need or something else, but rather, healthy boundaries, loving, supportive, non-judgmental fatherhood. I mean,
mhm,
that's a big task.
yeah,
That's a big task, and to me, it's directly related to how I can be with them, the characters internally.
yeah. Mm. Well, I want to give you the last word on this, Peter. What would you like to leave fathers with today related to this conversation?
Wow. I mean, just as you asked that, I feel such a warmth in my heart.
Mm.
Um, I mean, being a father is an incredibly demanding task. It's an incredibly important task. Um, it's not for the faint of heart. Um, I, I want, I want, I want fathers to not feel shame. I
Mm.
want fathers to be well. Um, yeah, I hope that um, what you and I are sharing today, Matthew, is supportive. I love men.
Mhm.
I love fathers, and I really want fathers to be well. And I just hope that um, there's something in the work you're doing, Matthew, and the courageous exploration you're undertaking that's supporting men. And I hope that my being with you today is providing something to support any man that might be hearing this
Mm.
on their journey with themselves. And I would like to say one other thing, and that is that there's no way I could be at this place in my relationship with myself without having been supported by others.
Mhm.
We are not meant to be living on an island alone. As men, we are profoundly sensitive creatures.
Mhm.
We feel incredibly deeply, and we need to be needed, and we need. And I just really support men to get what they need to be well and to find their way with what they need to find their way with, so that they can find themselves then showing up in the world in a way which is more aligned with what they aspire to be.
Mm. Amen. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation and sharing yourself and some of your cast of characters and your
Mm,
experience.
Such a pleasure. I feel enlivened and very, very grateful for you, Matthew. Thank you.
Mm.